the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Greetings. Welcome to Say So, where we talk about it, whatever it is, because what you do not know can hurt you. So let's get to the root. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Letitia R. Stuckey. And for today's episode, we will continue to part 3 of non-death related grief. This is a very intriguing topic for me, and there was a lot of curiosity as to the different types of grief and that are not. I decided to do some research. So as we embark on this episode, I'm going to review just a little from a small amount of content from the previous episodes. So I think it's important to go over the definition of disenfranchised grief. And it's important to know that it was coined, and it says that grief that persons experience when they incur a loss that is not or cannot be openly acknowledged, socially sanctioned, or publicly mourned. An example, or it's also known as hidden grief or sorrow. And once again, it goes unacknowledged or unvalidated by social norm. It's important also for us to go over disenfranchised grief shows up in 5 of more deeply into these 5 ways. The first is unrecognized relationships. Loss considered less significant. The third way that disenfranchised grief shows up is loss surrounded by stigma. And the fourth is it doesn't align with social norms. And the fifth is exclusion from mourning. So we're going to delve a little deeper, and this is definitely uncharted territory for me, but I felt it necessary to enter this territory. We're going to be talking about topics and or subjects that may not be popular, that some may not agree with, different lifestyles, but it's important to know and understand that we are all God's children, and regardless of what state we're found in, or regardless of what state that God finds us in, we are still his children. We have souls, and his desire is for our souls to be saved. So I am going to go ahead. All right. So as it pertains to unrecognized relationships, which is the first way, the LGBTQ. And if you're unfamiliar with that acronym, the L stands for lesbian, and which is basically a female homosexual. They're attracted to females, and they are females. G stands for gay, which is homosexual, basically, and sometimes gay to homosexual males. The B stands for bisexual, which basically means that the individual doesn't have a preference. Bi means more than one or two. So they may be attracted to males as well as females. The T stands for transgender, which means there's a gender identity difference from birth. So for example, I'm born a female, so I may identify as wanting to be a male. So that's an example of transgender. And the Q stands for, and this is something I did not know, the Q stands for queer or questioning. As it pertains to queer, that basically means that they're not heterosexual or cisgender. So what that is, identity and gender, it corresponds with their birth sex. So if I'm a woman, I identify as a woman. And I was questioning, basically, they're questioning their gender. So if I'm a woman, I'm questioning, should I be a man? If I'm a woman, my identity is questioned. So I may identify as a man and feel more drawn to dressing like a man, getting my hair cut or doing things to make my body not appear feminine, getting my hair cut or doing things to make my body not appear feminine if I'm curvaceous. And also you would be questioning your sexual orientation. So trying to figure out, if you are a female, if you like women or men or some combination. You just really don't know. So once again, under unrecognized relationships, LGBTQ people who aren't out or feel unsafe grieving the loss of a partner. So once again, disenfranchised is some things that are not acknowledged and they're not validated by society. Or polyamorous people who lose a non-primary partner who no one knew. And basically having more than one wife or having more than one partner or more than one husband, and let's say somebody passes away and it's not your primary partner, because typically there's a primary partner. Before you build on adding more wives or adding more husbands, there's usually you're married to one person and then you introduce another wife or another husband or another spouse. So that's basically what they're saying. It's not your main or your first wife. It might be your second, third, fourth, however many wives, or your first wife. It might be your second, third, fourth, however many wives or husbands that you have. So they're basically saying it's not really acknowledged because that's not your main or your first wife. Another unrecognized relationship is death of a casual partner, a friend with benefits, or an ex-partner. When friend with benefits or an ex-partner, when you are close to them. So because you may be grieving the loss of an ex-partner, and it may be an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, and people around may feel like, okay, so why are you taking this so hard? Because you two weren't together. This is, you're basically fornicating. You're friends, but you also have sex. There's not a relationship, and there's stereotypically no emotional tie, but we know that anytime that you enter into a sexual relationship with someone, there is a soul tie. So there is a spiritual element, and typically as women, our emotions go along with our bodies. Our emotions go along with our feelings for someone. If we care enough to give you our body or allow you to enter our bodies, then our emotions are attached. And like I said, there's also an automatic spiritual soul tie and connection. And there's mental, and it's all encompassing. The fourth one is death of an online friend or pen pal. So it may not be as acknowledged because you never really met them in person. You only have a cyber relationship, or the conversations that you've had or the amount of time you spent together. They may feel, you may feel close to that individual, and to not be able to write them or type with them, or communicate with them on a regular, consistent basis is a grief. You can grieve that loss. One for unrecognized relationships under the LGBTQ population would be death of someone you never knew, like an unknown sibling or an absent parent. And people may say, well, why are you once again taking this so hard? You didn't know your dad, or you didn't know your why are you once again taking this so hard? You didn't know your dad, or you didn't know your mom, or you didn't know your older sister. It makes me think of my situation, that my older sister passed away at 4 months and 3 days old, and I wasn't even born. So to the following year. But I dedicate Destiny's Child to my sibling. Her name was Shakita Levette Stuckey, and I dedicated it to her because there's still a sense of loss that she's not here. And that's just a real life example of that. So under unrecognized relationships, the second was less significant. And there's a few of these bullet points. The first one is adoption that doesn't go through. So people may feel that you should not grieve that loss of not adopting a child, or not being able to adopt a child for whatever reason. The process is stopped or discontinued, or is not, fully realized. The next bullet point is dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And I know of an individual who is caring for their mom, and she is suffering with dementia. And I mean, indeed is a loss. And indeed is a loss. And if your parent or the person that you're caring for, even if you're an in-home health nurse or something, if they don't know who you are, and let's say you've been with this client or patient for years, and now they're suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, and now they don't know who you are, and when you are and asking you what's your name and what are you doing here, and just disoriented and can't really remember or recall. And imagine that being your mom or your dad, your parent, and they don't know who you are, and treat you as if you're not their child because they don't recall or don't remember. Their child because they don't recall or don't remember. The third bullet point is loss of possession. So, there are individuals like myself that are sentimental. So there are certain things that you want to hold on to for an extended period of time or whatever, maybe pass down to your children. And if you were to lose one of those possessions, loss to you, and you would grieve that loss in some way, shape, or form. The next bullet point is loss of your home country. So, and I'm going to begin to speed up because this can become lengthy. The next bullet point is loss of safety, independence, or year. Identifies with my situation and my turbulent childhood beginning. And because when you've lost time is the one thing that you lose or use that you cannot get back. The next bullet point is loss of mobility or health. So, for example, I know of a gentleman that literally, he had MS and did not know it. And he was living in one of the bigger cities, maybe up north or something. So he was catching the bus. And long story short, he literally fell and was never able to walk again because whatever was damaged or injured in that fall, it triggered the onset of his MS, which is multiple sclerosis, which is when your bones and your just the use and the activity of your limbs deteriorates. And so, I mean, literally to be walking and independent and have a full-time job and just handling your business and to fall and never, and I mean, you just mourn the things that you thought, things like that. You wouldn't expect that to happen. If it does happen, then you're mourning the loss of, okay, I have children. I won't be able to walk my daughters down the aisle. I won't be able to, I'll be wheeled into graduation or family functions or funerals or weddings or whatever. So that's definitely an area of funerals or weddings or whatever. So that's definitely an area of grief and loss, a major area. The next bullet point is a mentor, a teacher, or a student. So you may grieve the loss of one of those three, but they're not biologically connected to you. So individuals may feel making this so hard. Once again, it's not your child. It's not anybody in your immediate or extended family. And this is the first one that society minimizes, the loss of a mentor, teacher, or a student. The next bullet point under also what society minimizes is the next one is a pet and a co-worker, as well as an honorary relative like a friend's child. So someone who is not biologically connected to you or your family, but it could be a close friend of the family. It's important to note that some people who want to offer sympathy and support may not know how to respond to grief related to something not often discussed. And in a previous episode with Tion Vincent, we talked about that. She experienced the sudden loss of her grandmother, and she talked about the things that people would say and the things that they would do that was repetitive, that became sort of irritating and was not helpful. Things like she's in a better place or she doesn't have to suffer anymore and things of that nature. They want that to be comforting, but you're still grieving the loss. I won't be able to see her here on earth again from this day forward. So that's just a real life example of that. Here are number 3 from the list of 5 ways that disenfranchised grief shows up is stigma related. So these are some things where there is a stigma, which means related. So these are some things where there is a stigma, which means it's not necessarily accepted by individuals, or they don't really understand it. So they can't accept what they don't understand. So the first one, the first bullet point is infertility. If you've never experienced infertility, which I have not, so I can't fully understand, but I know some individuals who have experienced it. You know, it takes an extended period of time or amount of years for them to actually conceive naturally. That's a grief and a loss. You know, if you have your life planned out and you feel like by this age I want to have all my kids and I want to be done with school by a certain age and I want to be married and be positioned in my career and all of that, you know, you're trying to have a child. Let's say you did get married. Let's say you do have a position in your career. You finished school and now you're attempting to have a child, and it takes 10 years or more or less to have a child. And you know, of course, automatically just assumed that when you're actually trying to have a child, you would have a child, and that may not be the case for everyone. The second bullet point is death by suicide or overdose. And I know of a family that experienced suicide of a relative, and there's just a lot of stigma attached to it, in so much